Hello, everybody, and welcome to week 4, where we'll be talking a little bit about writing in age. But before I introduce that topic, I just kind of wanted to say a few brief comments about last week. Again, a great discussion around voice and identity and plagiarism. And I kind of wanted to start off by reading a post that Ada had commented on the other day, which was, let me get it right here. This discussion about voice is very interesting, especially in an online course. Even though I never met you, I have a feeling that I know a lot about you from what you have posted in the last 3 years since we have been writing to each other. I think the voice comes true even more strongly when people lower their affective filter and allow the readers to see their identity. And Peter followed up by saying, I wonder if one's online chat voice is more honest or less rehearsed than one's other written voice in the same way. And I think that was a great comment. That's true. We can't see each other largely. You can see me, but we really know about each other from what we write and looking at the type of comments we make and how we structure those comments. Perhaps gives the other person some idea about who we are. But of course, voice construction is always a two-way street. You may write, the way you write is certainly unlocked by somebody else with their own way of seeing the world, and they're going to construct you in a particular way. So absolutely very interesting comment, especially for this online forum, where so much is dependent on writing and presenting ourselves to the other in written rhetorical form. I wanted to read a definition of voice that was actually posed by Paul Matsuda in an article he wrote in 2002, I believe it was. 2001, actually. If you are familiar with the Journal of Second Language Writing, they had a special issue on voice in 2001 where they had people like Paul Matsuda, they had Paul Pryor, they had Belcher and Herrera, which is the article that you had to read this past week, Roz Ivanich, for example, and they were all talking about voice and the construction of voice. And in the end, Dwight Atkinson, who's at the university, Purdue University, kind of summarized everything and kind of gave his commentary about voice and the ways in which the field could start looking at voice. But anyway, this is what Paul Matsuda said. He said, I define voice as follows. Voice is the amalgamative effect of the use of discursive and non-discursive features that language users choose, deliberately or otherwise, from socially available yet ever-changing repertoires. Simply put, voice is the quality that makes impersonation or mimicking possible. So he's one of very few people who have actually tried to come up with a particular definition of voice. And I know earlier in the week I posted a definition of voice from the Ontario curriculum. That's largely a little bit more linked to the grammatical and stylistic features that appear in language, and then provided a list of various ways in which the voice is assessed depending on grade. And I think it was it Alyssa who recently posted a descriptive rubric for voice that was, I think, in Vicky Spandel's book, which is also very interesting to look at, and how that matches up with the 6-trait way of assessing writing. So one other thing I actually wanted to mention on voice, linking voice to identity, because there are lots of posts around that. You may want to check out Tardy and Matsuda. This is Christine Tardy and Paul Matsuda wrote an article in 2009, and that article is called The Construction of Author Voice by Editorial Board Members. And what's really interesting about this piece is they set up a study where they had a graduate student in rhetoric and composition, and the students submitted a manuscript for publication, and they sent it out, if I believe, to 2 different editorial boards. And the editors made comments on the text, and then there was the additional, they asked the editors to explain who they thought wrote the text, and to identify the person by background, gender, race, class, status, these kinds of things. And the editors wrote back explaining who they thought the author was based on the rhetorical choices or the grammatical choices made. So very interesting, and the fact that the both editors were able to hit the nail on the head on the author of the text based on the way in which this person represented him or herself. I won't tell you any more than that. You should read it for yourselves. And it really gives you the sense of, when we write and we're applying voice, do we always make choices when representing ourselves as voice? Or are there ways in which we represent ourselves that we're completely unaware of that come through in the text? So we may be choosing to do particular things because we want to create a particular voice, for example. But there may be things that are happening that we're completely unaware of, that are unlocked by the reader and their own ways in which they see rhetoric and voice being negotiated in the particular text. So if you have a moment, check that out. I think you'll find it very interesting. So, moving on to this week, there are 4 articles that I posted for everybody, and I only ask that you read 2. So choose 2 that speak to you in particular ways. Maybe they could be articles that are representative of the group of students you're working with currently, and groups that you may like to work with in the future. So those 4 are, the first one is by Buckwalter and Lowe, and it's Emergent Biliteracy in Chinese and English, and it looks at a young boy named Ming, whose parents are Chinese doctoral students, I think, in the United States. And the 2 researchers spend some time with the student looking at his biliterate identity, or writing, I should say, not identity, well, both actually, writing and identity, through his interactions with parents and his experience in school, learning English with his peers, and learning how to read and write in these contexts. So if you're working with young students, I think Ming was about 5 years old, so primary school, if you will. Very interesting piece, and it gives us thinking about, what teachers and parents can do with their young children in terms of developing literacy skills and writing skills, and also allows us in certain ways to think back when we were learning to write. So those first introductory pieces that you wrote for me and for each other, thinking about, did your parents actually save any of those early drawings that you did as a child, and thinking about the process in which you wrote and discovered writing for yourself. The second piece is on adolescence, and the article is by Yi, and it's Adolescent Multilingual Writers' Transitions Across In and Out of School Writing Contexts. And this was sort of a single case study of a young woman named Ji He. And this young woman is learning English, and she's sort of exploring English, and she wants to become a better writer, and eventually wants to see herself as a writer. And sort of her struggles in writing in English in academic contexts. And authors look at, how she uses English both in school and out of school, and how both those 2 spaces inform each other in the development of the writer identity in this young woman. So if you're interested in adolescence, that would be a good piece to look at. The next one is by Gentil, and this is Commitments to Academic Biliteracy, Case Studies of Francophone University Writers. And this is another very interesting piece, and this focuses on 3 graduate students at a university in Montreal, and they're sort of coming to voice and negotiating identity in sort of a very political context, if you will. So having very strong Francophone backgrounds, many of them, I think 2 of the 3 came from rural areas in Quebec, and how they had to negotiate the power behind English and writing in academic English, and the process of becoming someone else through the writing process, through that negotiation process. And so you learn a little bit about the authors themselves, their background, their struggles, and how they wanted to represent themselves, and their links to their own Francophone community. So if you're interested in reading about graduate students who are multilingual or bilingual in the process of writing, that also might be very interesting. The last piece is working with adults, and it's analyzing voice in the writing of Chinese teachers of English. So again, drawing a little bit more on the voice metaphor, and again, voice and writing, they go together, and lots of pieces on writing will involve voice. So this, if you enjoy the conversation of voice, you can certainly explore it a little bit more in this piece. And this looks at the authors who are Elizabeth Spaulding et al. Went to China, and they interviewed teachers about the writing process. They looked at the writing that they did and did observations as well. So they claim that this article that they wrote, this study that they started, is actually in direct response to the Peter Elbow article that you read this past week. So maybe a nice sort of continuation there. So I certainly encourage you to check it out if you're interested in adult teachers exploring voice in their writing who are second language writers. They also have a very nice introduction or kind of an overview of the theoretical frameworks on voice that look at expressivism, empowerment based on critical theory, and social constructionism. So again, the whole issue around voice and identity, largely there's no one particular answer. It really depends on which theoretical framework and which scholars you fall in line with in terms of what you believe about that. And they do a very nice job of kind of outlining all of that. So those are the 4 articles, and please choose 2 of them. And I think they're all wonderfully written and very interesting, and so I think you'll really enjoy them. 2 things before I leave here. There are 3 books I wanted to share with you. One is Second Language Identities by David Block. So if you want to learn more about what the field has said about identity construction, check out his book. Another book you may find interesting is Writing for Scholarly Publication, Behind the Scenes in Language Education. And these are all scholars, for example, like Ryota Kubota, who you read with Contrastive Rhetoric, talking about writing and coming to voice as a scholar and as a second language writer of English. So it's very interesting to see how voice is taken up with scholars who are veteran writers and publishers themselves. And the last piece, if you're interested in learning more about writing and identity and voice and novels, is Eva Hoffman's book, Lost in Translation, which is a great book to read and seeing how this woman explores her own identity through her writing. So again, have a great week, and I look forward to reading. Take care. Bye-bye.